Hey kids, my guest today got her start in public service in the early 80s as a community activist out west, and eventually, and I found this most fascinating when I was researching you before the last election, the leader of the Manitoba arm of the Communist Party of Canada. Bravo. It's part of why I voted for you. In 2003, she was elected here in Toronto to Toronto City Council, where she has served ever since, and she is currently the councillor for Ward 14. Please welcome to the Handsome Genius Club, Toronto City Councillor Paula Fletcher. Hello, Ms.
Thank
Fletcher.
you. Great to. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely.
I have wanted to talk to you probably since the last municipal election, when our benevolent leader forced city council to reduce from 47 to 25 seats.
Correct.
In fact, the only people who are fighting this move are a small group of left-wing councillors, along with a network of activist groups they've entrenched themselves in the power under the status quo over the years.
In retrospect, what was your opinion of that decision at the time, and how do you think it's working out now?
That was just a shock, but not so much because our benevolent leader has always wanted to control all the politics in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And we always called them twin mayors when his brother was the mayor. So finding that he had all this power at the province must have just been so exciting for him. And this was an attempt to really take away a lot of the power, which has happened, make life a little more difficult for councillors and perhaps easier for lobbyists and developers and others, because it's very hard to stay on top of absolutely everything.
Right.
I come from a small town in Sault Ste. Marie. Its population is 70,000 people. I have more constituents in my riding, in my ward, than my old hometown. I have 111,000 constituents, and my hometown has 70. So every time I see that population sign when I drive into it, I think, oh my God, what did he do? And we know what he did.
Yeah. And how do we think it's working now, though? You say it's hard to keep on top of everything, which of course it would be. And there was much talk at the time about the pressure that was going to be put on council staff. But I wondered, is the business of the city getting done?
Well, the business of the city is getting done, but one of the roles of councillors is oversight, and it is hard to have the degree of oversight that we might like to have. Also, we have a lot of agencies, boards, and commissions.
Yeah.
We've had to reduce the number of councillors with their oversight, such as on Toronto Community Housing and other places where you really need to have a strong component of councillors because we are representing the shareholder. So I just think the other thing that's interesting is we have COVID right in the middle of it.
Right.
So we don't really know exactly how that would all be rolling out because everybody's been pushed to the sidelines under the emergency.
You mentioned housing in the city, and I know that particularly here in my own neighborhood, there are a handful of buildings where people are involved in rent strikes or rent protests because applications are being made for AGIs, for above
Increased
standard
guidelines.
right,
Yeah.
above
increased
guideline
guidelines.
increases
Yeah.
to their rent. And this is in the midst of what was supposed to be a rent freeze in Toronto. I think the last number I saw was that before the year before the pandemic started, there had been 40 such applications, and since the pandemic started in the last year, there have been more than 90. So it seems like with that loophole, people are trying to get around the rent freeze by applying for AGIs. Have you been involved in any of these, with any of these groups that are protesting? Have you been in contact with any of the landlords?
I've been in contact with tenants, and typically when there is an above increase guideline, I will go out to the building with the Federation of Tenants Associations, Metro Toronto Federation of Tenants.
Yes.
And we will meet with the tenants, explain how they get a grant to fight the above increase guidelines, because they are really, they're a really clear requirement in order to have an increase. So I'm very happy to do that. I've been on Cosburn quite a few times and Gamble quite a few times, and meeting out in parking lots and during COVID even, and supporting tenants with the rent strikes and everything else. Also very active around rent evictions, because this is really something that wasn't happening much before, but wow. Landlords are buying whole buildings and then throwing people onto the street, saying they need to go because they're renovating the building, and then of course they're just going to raise the rent, not really renovating the building.
Right. Well, I mean, that again, coming up to the last municipal election, that was a concern of mine here, in that my building was sold for the first time apparently in about 30 years. And I've been here now for 11 years. So the difference between my rent and the starting rent for this apartment is large.
It's significant. Yes. And so they do try to drive people out and that don't know they have the right to return. If someone says they're going to renovate your place, you have the right to return after. We're trying to get a new bylaw like they have in Westminster, BC, which will stop the rent evictions, because these are all affordable rents like yours and others. And we're hearing from people when Acorn have meetings, what's happened to them when they moved. And now they're having to pay triple the rent in a new place, and they wish they'd stayed put and fought it. So I'm always here to help people fight injustice.
Fantastic. That is wonderful to hear. Just yesterday, as we're recording this on Friday, it's going to go out on Monday, but just yesterday, City Council voted 17-7 to change the name of Dundas Street after a year or so of intense reevaluation of the legacy of Henry Dundas. You voted yes on that.
Dundas, a name ubiquitous in Toronto, soon to be no more.
The item is amended, carries.
Toronto City Council voting today to replace it.
You can never go wrong doing the right thing.
What do you think of changes like this? Are there more coming to the city? And what was your thought process going into that vote?
Well, I think there will be some more coming to the city. I was there on the walk for the kids whose bones have been found, and we went to Ryerson. I left 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, Ryerson statue came down. We're in a time of really great change for social justice, dealing with the history of the past and the unfairness of the history of the past, what's gone on in our country, what's gone on around the world. And so I believe that the renaming of Dundas really caught fire because of the death of George Floyd, and then discovering that Henry Dundas never lived here. He was just named that because he was in, I guess Simcoe was somehow had to please him in some way. So there's no real connection. And then it turns out he actually prolonged his actions, prolonged the slave trade. So no matter how you try to fix Henry Dundas, it's really hard to do. And I spoke at council and talked about Queen and Logan actually was a very well-known stop and part of the Underground Railroad, that we have so much local history of champions, of heroes in our neighborhoods that don't have streets named after them. Why we need to rethink this name Dundas and perhaps some of the other ones. I'm quite affronted by the Sir John A. Macdonald Plaza at Union Station. I did ask some questions about that, and I'll probably continue that vein of questions, because it was done with the snap of a fingers. And I think the Indigenous Affairs Committee and the Indigenous community has to have a look and tell us if we did the right thing or not. I didn't support that at the time, but it was a majority vote of council.
And I'm assuming that you're also supportive of the move to change the name of Ryerson University.
Let's see what happens. It's a very big change to change Ryerson University, but I just read that Sir John A. Macdonald, they've taken him down in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
They're not giving him any platform. That around the world, people are repudiating those leaders
Mm-hmm.
that do not have the values that we have today, and we're part of a very dark chapter in the history of our country and other countries.
I heard a news report yesterday that changing the name of Dundas Street could cost the city $4 to $5 million. Is that a correct estimate?
I think it's going to cost money because you have to. There's a lot of legal documents
Right.
for all the buildings that are along Dundas and the businesses that are along Dundas. So, but I don't think we should let money get in our way to right the wrongs of the past.
But the reason I ask about the estimate for the city is the businesses along Dundas that will have to be making these changes. Is the city planning any kind of compensation fund for legal expenses for the businesses that are going to be having to make changes to their legal documents?
No, we'll look at that, but we have to change all of our legal underpinnings and everything. So it's going to be a long process because we're still going out for consultation now,
Right.
as you know. It was not changed yesterday, but
Yeah.
I can't wait to change Dundas. And Dundas actually, through a good part of my ward, actually never existed previously. It was built maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and it was called Apple Grove. That was the name of the street. So maybe we can go back to that historic.
I was about to ask, do you have any personal preferences for what the street might end up being called?
Well, I think we'll have to ask about the history of that section. Dundas did not go all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of going through the ward and of Doug Ford, Ford has been a heavy influence on the plans for what is now being called the Ontario line, the subway line, which, I mean, for years was just known as the Downtown Relief Line that never got built in the 80s.
Good evening. A massive transit announcement for Toronto as the province and city reach an agreement in theory. In a nutshell, Mayor John Tory has agreed he will support Doug Ford's Ontario line. In exchange, the city gets to keep control of its subways, which the province had been threatening to take over.
We have defended our TTC. We have found a way to move forward on transit expansion.
It is being portrayed as a win-win. The city keeps control of subways and the province builds the Ontario line. Premier Doug Ford's jewel in his nearly $30 billion transit plan, which replaces the city's previously planned relief line. The ambitious promise for the Ontario line is that it will run from the Science Centre to Ontario Place at a cost of $10.9 billion and a completion date of 2027.
And that line cuts straight through Ward 14. Should Leslieville residents in particular be worried about what the above grade portions of this subway line are going to do to their neighborhood?
Absolutely. These neighborhoods, everybody's very big transit. We have streetcars that squeal all night. We've got everything going. Everybody's a big transit booster. They all take transit. They know about transit, no problem. But remember the Downtown Relief Line, actually before 2018 election of the Ford Conservatives, actually had an approved plan to be underground. It was a TTC project. Doug Ford said, TTC, I'm taking everything away from you. We will do everything through Metrolinx. They ripped up the plan for the Downtown Relief Line and put everything on their tracks. The reason why it cuts right through the ward is because we have railroad tracks that cut through there. Go Transit is expanding to 4 tracks. The Ontario line will be another 2 tracks. There will be a great amount of impact from this because, just think about building it. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The number of trees that have to come down, the impact later, the big walls that are going to have to be built there. And then recently, we understand they have to raise the track bed completely by 6 feet, the entire thing for the above ground section. And all of the 5 bridges that are across Eastern, Queen, Dundas, Logan, and Carlaw, they all have to be completely rebuilt.
Wow.
This is not a small project. And every time there's something new that creates a greater and greater impact for the community, a negative impact.
Mm-hmm. Other than putting more money in somebody else's pocket, what is the benefit of or what are you being told is the benefit of the current Ontario line plan?
Oh, well, we know there's a benefit to having a relief line. The Ontario line is the Doug Ford relief line.
Yeah.
Taken away. So really to move people off the young subway line.
Yeah.
Right? This is so crowded. People tell you they're standing there waiting 3 and 4 and 5 trains in order to just get on a train.
Yeah.
So we know it's needed, but seriously, when you think about the impact of putting it above ground, you might rethink and say, let's go back to the original plan,
Yeah.
which is below ground and did not have the impact.
Yeah, that was the intention of my question is the Ontario line versus the previously approved plan by the TTC. What could you have been told? What could City Council possibly have been told that makes the Ontario line plan better than the originally approved TTC plan?
Well, City Council, even though we've had all transit planning removed from us, except for signing an MOU saying that we'd like to have rapid transit, City Council has said bury that section of the line and review the community's plan, bury that section, stop with the impact. So I have so many motions asking, what's the impact on parks? What's the impact on transit? What the existing transit? What's the impact on traffic? What's the impact on trees? What's the just impact on creating chaos?
Right.
It's very hard. Metrolinx doesn't say, yes, we're going to create tremendous chaos. But I think when we look at it, we realize that this is going to be hellish, actually, should they proceed.
Is there a timetable for shovels in the ground on this project?
Like every Doug Ford project, it changes. It's changing.
Yeah.
Later. It's always going out by 6 months, and then, we're not ready. It's another 6 months.
Yeah.
The Scarborough subway was voted to happen in 2013. That's 8 years ago. And somehow nothing's happened.
Right.
So it's just, when you have such grandiose plans, but they're very hard to do, then everything will be late, actually, just the way of the world.
Yeah. As evidenced by the Eglinton Crosstown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to be more realistic. You announce something and everybody thinks, great, that's going to happen. It takes years to get things implemented.
Yeah.
And particularly with transit, napkin transit doesn't work very well. It's got to be engineered transit, not back of the napkin.
Very well said. I wonder, as their plans are being formulated, as they're coming together, do we know of plans with the Ontario line to expropriate any existing homes or businesses? Is that going to end up being part of the plan?
Oh yeah, I believe there will be expropriations of homes and businesses. There would have been with the below ground as well. Building transit in a super dense, already built up city, putting the transit through there, that's very hard to do.
Yeah. Let me just catch myself here.
There will
Oh,
be a station at Pape and Cosburn somewhere. We still
Yeah.
don't know exactly where. And again, what the impact is on that.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't serve to just drive all the rents up. And what it really does is allow people to get on rapid transit. We will be seeing what happens.
Well, personally, right at the corner of Pape and Gamble, there is what is now an empty lot, which for years was a gas station and a four shop little strip mall. And
I think that's the Shoppers Drugs now.
that
Yes.
was intended to be the owner of what was Pape Subs told me before he closed down that it was going to be a new building for Shoppers Drug Mart.
Right.
But that doesn't seem to be happening. And I wonder if that bit of land, if somebody has given somebody, the elbow to say that bit of land might end up being a transit station. So don't build anything there because we're just going to knock it down.
Could be. I'll have to check. You could have hit the nail right on the head. I'll be checking.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know because I'm close enough. My building is close enough to Pape that I am going to hear a lot of construction in a few years.
Right.
So. With the city reopening today, more businesses, more gatherings being allowed, do you have any opinion on how the city and or the province has done with this managing the shutdowns and reopenings, and especially this third wave?
I think people just want to know what the rules are.
Yeah.
They want consistency. The businesses want to get open as quickly as possible in the safest way as possible. And everybody's pretty excited. We really are waiting until we get a certain saturation point for vaccines before we can fully, open fully for first and second doses. So that's why I asked for that clinic that was yesterday at Pape and Cosburn, because the rates are actually fairly low along Cosburn and Gamble in that apartment neighborhood area. So I'm very committed to getting those rates up so we can all get back to something that's far more normal.
Are you or is the council concerned about the possibility of a fourth wave and what it might mean for the city?
I have heard from our intrepid chair of the Board of Health, Joe Cressy, that there could be a fourth wave in the middle of September or, mid to late September. It would not be the big delta that we normally have, the big spike, but some kind of little fourth wave as this pandemic kind of peters out and there's enough people have been vaccinated. If we don't get a high vaccination rate and meet the targets, then yes, I think we're probably in for the fourth wave. If we can get people out, particularly those people that haven't had access or are a little reluctant or don't speak English, aren't too sure, then I think we can get to a point where we can perhaps stem off the fact that there might be a fourth wave.
Are you, now that things are starting to reopen, is there anything in the ward that you're looking forward to this summer? I don't think we're going to have Taste of the Danforth this year, but
no festivals.
Yeah.
No festivals. I think I love to kind of sit outside. I think that's great. I love looking at the Danforth. It's so animated with Destination Danforth and all the cafes. It's spectacular. I think, like a lot of other people, in-person shopping, I just want to go in and touch a few things instead of just looking at them online. I've talked to a lot of people, they feel the same way. Just the fabric, the touch, the feel, the smell, everything. This normal shopping experience, it's great to be able to have things delivered right to your door, but it doesn't take the place of the person who owns the store, the clerk, however you're going to have those relationships. They are social relationships.
Yeah.
Shopping is a social relationship, and I'm looking forward to maintaining and rekindling some of mine.
How do you feel about the news that Toronto FC is going to be allowed to play games, and that we might be looking at the Blue Jays coming back to the Rogers Centre for at least part of their season? Is this a good idea?
I think it's not up to me. It's up to our MOH and the province and everything else, but we shouldn't do things too quickly. I just was watching the ticker go by yesterday and see that quite a few sports teams have a lot of positive COVID cases.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I told my subscribers on Patreon that I would honestly be letting myself down if I did not ask you, how does young Paula Fletcher become the leader of the Communist Party of Canada in Manitoba? Honest to goodness, I had been living in this ward for 8 years before the wards were combined and the new municipal election, the last municipal election, and I took the time to research the people in the field, and just a perfunctory perusal of your Wikipedia page. When I struck upon that line, I said, okay, well, my vote is decided, because I need to know that there is somebody in City Hall representing this ward that when big money comes for the little guy, somebody will put in an effort on the little guy's behalf. And I, reading up on you, I trusted that you were that person. But I'm fascinated by how did you become the leader of the Communist Party of Canada in Manitoba? I have to know.
Well, for the very reason you just said. Well, look at all that money. Look at the little guy. Manitoba and Winnipeg had a very, very... oh dear.
Oh, no,
sorry.
you're back. No, that's fine.
I'm back. Long history of left-wing representation, left-wing city councillors in the legislature as well, and very strong anti-discrimination policies, working with First Nations, working with Indigenous communities. I worked forever on solidarity with the ANC in South Africa, all through that. So those were all the people that were doing that work, and I came into that and then became the leader. Young Paula Fletcher, older Paula Fletcher is still fights injustice, stands up for the little guy, fights for tenants, doesn't like to see big money try to roll in and do whatever it wants, defends our waterfront, so it's all for us, not just for the wealthy. I am all about making sure that everybody has their fair share and fair shake.
Fantastic. Well, I, for one, very much appreciate the fact that however it happened, I now get to have you as my representative in City Hall, and I am very grateful to you for taking the time out today to talk to us in the Handsome Genius Club.
And I am very happy to have met you and to talk to you, and you know where I am if you're running into problems up there, for sure.
Thank you
Always
very
here.
much. Thank you.
Okay, great. Bye now.
Bye.